So think of it like this. Remember the case of brown becoming purple and red. Well, imagine if instead of brown getting purple getting all of brown psychology and red also getting all of brown psychology, there are some changes. So purple gets much of brown psychology and red gets much of brown psychology, but neither gets all. Moreover, each gets different bits. So maybe purple gets all of brown's beliefs and memories and none of brown's desires, and red gets all of brown's desires and fears, but none of uh, brown's beliefs or memories. Now here's a question. Which of purple and red in that example has a better claim to being the same person as brown? And what Parfit wants to say is, it depends on what you're interested in. If what you're interested in is similarity in belief, then purple would be the same person as brown. If what you're interested in is similarity of desire, then red would be the same person as brown. And he thinks both are legitimate interests. That is, it may be that the most important thing from your point of view for being brown is having the same beliefs. And it may be that from your point of view, the most important thing for being brown is having the same desires. And there's no objective fact about which point of view is the right point of view. And consequently, whether purple is the survivor of brown in this example, or instead red is the survivor of brown, depends on what you're interested in. So one person may look at the situation and correctly say, given my interests, purple is the survival of brown. And another person may look at this and say, given my interests, purple isn't the survivor of brown, but red is. And they can both be correct because given their interests, they're correct. And your interests are partly what's determining what's correct. So here's a consequence, and this is a quote from Parfit. When I say, there is no person who we both are, I am only giving my decision. Another person could say, it will be you, thus deciding differently. There is no question of either of these decisions being a mistake. Whether to say I, or one of my future selves, or a descendant self, is entirely a matter of choice. The matter of fact, which must be agreed, is only whether the disjunction applies. The question, are X and R the same person, thus becomes, is X at least an ancestral or descendant self of R? So Parfit's saying here that you can identify continuity as an objective relation. It doesn't depend on your interest. But if you want to talk about being the same person, being the same individual, being a survivor of, in some important sense, then you're talking about something subjective because it depends on which features you think are the most important ones for survival. And there is no objective answer to that question, which are the most important for survival. It just depends on what you're interested in. Consequently, questions of survival have no single definite correct answer. So returning to an example I've brought up a number of times, suppose at the beginning of the semester you wanted to be an engineer and now you want to be a theater arts performer. You can imagine two different people looking at you and one of them says, look, you're not the same person anymore. In the sense that you are not the survivor of that person. You are a totally distinct person from the person who started the semester. And someone else looks at you and it's like, look, it doesn't really matter what you want to be. Your personality is the same. Your memories are the same and so on and so forth. That's what I care about. So you are the same person. You are the survivor of the person who started the semester. And Parfit's point is that neither of these assessments is objectively correct or incorrect. Each is correct from its own point of view. Now, in order to really understand this idea, you have to have some notion of subjective truth that you can understand. And what I want you to see is you already have this notion. You already understand what a subjective truth is. So remember when we talked about cultural relativism, the view that what's morally true depends on your culture. We gave the following example. We said, if members of a group condemn all torture, then torture is wrong relative to that group. And if members of another group approve some torture, then torture is false according to that group. That is, some torture is morally permissible according to that group. Consequently, if a member of the first group judges an instance of torture to be morally permissible, she's got to be wrong. But if a member of the second group judges an instance of torture to be morally permissible, she may be right. So you can have two people look at the same exact objective event in the world, green torturing yellow, and one of them says it's wrong, and the other says it's wrong, and the first who says it's wrong is saying something false, and the second who says it's wrong is saying something true. Why? Because the truth is relative to culture. Now, I don't know if you picked up on my attitude about this. I think that Boghossian is right and that cultural relativism is a false moral theory. Uh, that being said, the point here isn't that cultural relativism is plausible. The point is just this, that we can relativize some claims to the individual speaker. That is, you can make sense of the idea that the truth of a claim is relative to a speaker. And since you can make sense of the idea that the truth of a claim is relative to a speaker, you can make sense of the idea that truths about claims about survival can be relativized to a speaker. Here's a really simple case in which it's clear that the truth of a claim really is relativized to the speaker. And I mentioned this kind of case in class when we went over cultural relativism. If I say, that is, I, Stephen Biggs, say, I am 75 inches tall, what I say is true. Whereas for at least some of you out there, if you say that very same sentence, I am 75 inches tall, what you say is false. And the reason is because the word I refers to whomever is speaking. When I say it, it refers to me, and when you say it, it refers to you. So when I say I am 75 inches tall, the proposition I express is Stephen Biggs is 75 inches tall. And when you say I am 75 inches tall, the proposition you express is a different proposition. And consequently, my statement, I am 75 inches tall, can be true even if yours, I am 75 inches tall, is false. Similarly, the idea goes, this is just further elaboration. Similarly, the idea goes, if you say person A, purple, let's say, is the survivor of brown, and person B, red, let's say, is not the survivor of brown, that can be true, even if when I say the very same thing, person A is the survivor of brown and person B is not, what I say is false. Why? Because when you say person A is the survivor of brown and person B is not, what you mean is relative to the features that I think are most important for survival in this case, person A is the survivor of brown, but B is not. And when I say the same thing, I mean relative to the features that I think are most important in this case. So long as the features I think are most important aren't the same as the ones that you think are most important, then we can come to different verdicts and both be correct, or we can come to the same verdict and only one of us be correct. Okay, so that's the sort of main aspect of the theory. We'll stop there, and next time we will just very briefly, it will be a very short segment, talk about some consequences of Parfit's theory, or at least consequences he thinks his theory has.